House and the special counsel. Is the president going to testify? So this letter to the Mueller folks saying, you know what, we don't think he has to.
His attorneys are dead right when they say they're not going to put the president in a chair facing Bob Mueller, because no good will come from that.
Our own Martha McCallum interviewed Trey Gowdy, and frankly, that interview is still reverberating.
When he made the statement, the FBI behaved exactly like my fellow citizens would want them to behave. Really?
Here we are, day 500 of the administration.
Everywhere you look, there's Trump progress. He's there for the forgotten man and the forgotten woman, not the cranks on cable TV.
The anti-Trump media still pushing those conspiracy theories about Melania Trump's absence in public.
They are obsessed. This is just another symptom of Trump derangement syndrome. And when they haven't had enough of attacking our president, they move along and they attack his family.
There was a note in the door stating that we had a violation, a flag violation, excessive flag. We feel this is a patriotic act. It's about supporting our troops.
This show is still rolling on, which is why we got Train playing.
We do. And the big question this morning is, can you be too patriotic?
Excessively patriotic.
No!
Is it possible? Of course, we say no, but one town in Massachusetts, small town, that last guy you heard there, he's a business owner. Teeny little town. Maybe it's big town, little town, I don't know, I hadn't heard of it, but it's probably a wonderful medium-sized town. And this business owner said, I want flags on the corner. I do it every year from Memorial Day to the 4th of July to honor the vets, honor the fallen. And the town manager came up and said, excuse me, sir, you have excessive amount of flags on your property. They're trying to make him take them down. Instead, well, we're going to talk to him later.
We're going to find out how to send him more flags.
Yes.
I want to get his address. I want to say,
But
how
he
do our
already
viewers
did.
send him more
He
flags?
already filled the
Let's
lawn
double it.
with double the flags. So we're going to be talking to him later on in the show. You don't
Well
want to miss
done,
it. But good morning to all of you. Happy Sunday
Great
morning.
to
We
see
are
you.
happy to be here. And there's a lot of news,
Yeah.
as always, to get
Stick
to.
with us halfway through the show, but we're just getting started.
A lot of people talking this morning about this 20-page letter that the president's attorneys wrote in January to Robert Mueller, the special counsel, that basically laid out their case, why there should not be a subpoena to force him to testify in this case. Among other reasons, the big picture here is that the president's lawyers make the case that he has vast executive power, the president, and thus cannot face obstruction of justice charges. And in the case of James Comey, for example, firing him, he completely had the power to do that. So John Dowd and Jay Sekulow write, among other things, quote, could neither constitutionally nor legally constitute obstruction, because that would amount to him obstructing himself, basically laying it out there.
He has
that
nothing
this
to hide
president has
here.
the power and he doesn't have anything to hide.
Yeah, and that he has the power, as they're saying, to shut this whole thing down. So the other question is, who leaks this, right? Because it has to benefit somebody. Does it benefit the Mueller team? Does it benefit the Trump team? And you could argue maybe it benefits both in some way, that the Mueller team could say, see, this is a perfect example of the president thinking that he is above the law, and the Trump team saying, we've got nothing to hide here, and we do have certain powers and certain authorities to act.
Yeah, and we had Corey Lewandowski on earlier. He talked about how so much of this needs to be seen through the context of what was actually done as it pertains to Comey and what's actually not been done as it pertains to Mueller. He hasn't fired Mueller. The investigation, I've said it so many times I can't say it anymore, investigation is still going. Here's what Corey said earlier in the program.
So it goes right back to the biggest problem that this administration has had, which is leaks coming from either inside the building or somewhere within the administration. But I think the premise is exactly right. If the president were to ask me, and he never has, I would recommend not sitting down with the Mueller team, because what the Mueller team can do is they can write a report to the Department of Justice and ultimately to Congress on if there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russia. This investigation has been taking place now to the tune of over $10 million for about a year and a half. It's time to end the investigation and tell the American people what we already know.
And that is exactly what the Trump attorneys are telling him. And Dershowitz, Dr. Dershowitz, who we have on the show all the time, saying you can't benefit in any way by sitting down with Robert Mueller and having this interview. It sounds like, from listening to Rudy Giuliani, the president wants to have the sit down. He's saying, I have nothing to hide. Just let me answer these questions. They're saying that's not a good idea.
I'm sure he's of two minds of it, because if you're guilty, you don't sit down. But the president has said from the beginning that he's not guilty, that he's innocent. If we had any evidence, it would be emblazoned. I said this before, and I mean it. It would be a permanent banner on CNN.
You think they have it ready to go?
They would have it ready to go, and it would burn on every screen, because they would never take it down. If they had a crime, if they had collusion, they'd do it already. So you have to think, we're 500 days into this presidency. Take stock. What has he done? What's been done to him? What's he done? He fired Comey, has the prerogative to do so. That's what they're defending. And he said a lot of bad things about Bob Mueller, because Bob Mueller's been going after after him in what he calls a witch hunt. What's been done to him? Endless lies, endless leaks, spies or informants, however you want to say it, unrelenting resistance first from Never Trumpers, then from the media, then from the Democrats.
You know what is also done? Is in this statement.
Has he colluded with Russia?
Well, no, there's no evidence of that.
None.
But in this 20-page letter from the president's own attorneys, they say he dictated the statement to the New York Times about the Donald Trump Jr. meeting in the summer of 2016 at Trump Tower. Why is that significant? Well, Jay Sekulow, one of the attorneys who co-wrote this 20-page letter, he said back in July of 2017 that the president had nothing to do with the statement and had nothing to do with it. So which version of the Trump attorney
okay, so is that what you're hinging the entire argument about Russian collusion?
That would be one
that's what it's coming down to.
But if you're innocent, why are your lawyers telling two different things?
Let's get someone tripped up because you're under siege from all sides, from every news.
They made me not tell the truth.
13 angry Democrats investigating you.
Angry Democrats made me do it.
I think you make a good point. Those would be some of the questions that Robert Mueller would ask President Trump. They're going to get into the weeds.
I'm not saying that proves guilt. But if you're innocent, why did your attorney say in July of 2017? He had nothing to do with that statement. Then in January of 2018, you write a 20-page letter to the special counsel saying he dictated the statement.
That's exactly why you don't sit down, because it's a lose-lose.
Because the
when
facts.
You're innocent. When you're innocent and you didn't do anything wrong and they're trying to trip you up, why give them a chance to do it?
who
So what do you think? And that's not going to prove collusion. I don't know. Let us know. Friends at FoxNews.com. Clearly, we're debating this morning.
You know who I
the
wonder?
camera's off, it even gets more ferocious. But it's a lot of fun to talk.
I wonder what someone thinks about this. Barack Obama.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about him in a long time, but there's a new book that came out this week. Ben Rhodes, who of course was on his national security team, and he talks about Barack Obama and how he felt about the election and after. This is right after Trump won, right? Do we have the quote we could put up?
Yep.
It says
motorcade. He talks about a conversation he's having with the president. President says to Ben Rhodes from this book, he says, "What if we were wrong? Maybe we pushed too far," Mr. Obama said. "Maybe people just want to fall back into their tribe. Sometimes I wonder whether I was 10 or 20 years too early," implying he was sophisticated. He was a man beyond his time.
It's all about him,
and we retreated to
Trump. It's all about him. Maybe
the country wasn't ready for me yet. So if you're wondering how to analyze this, Maureen Dowd did it for you. And here's what she says. She said, he is saying that sadly, we were not enlightened enough for the momentous changes wrought by the smartest people in the world, or even evolved enough for the first African-American president. We just weren't ready for his amazing awesomeness.
Is she teasing the Obama people in the New York Times with that? They're amazing.
No, but she goes on. She says, but by the end of his second term, he had lost the narrative about lifting up people, about buoying them on economic issues and soothing their jitters about globalization. They need to know what is in it for them. Yet Obama ignored the restiveness here and around the world. He threw his weight behind the most status quo, elitist candidate. Those are
that
strong
last
words.
point I think is really important for Maureen Dowd in the New York Times this morning, because was he a sellout, basically? For all the high-mindedness in this book from Ben Rhodes and all the statements from Barack Obama, he made some sort of speech, I think, in recent days as well, about there were no scandals in my administration. They were so perfect and all of that. And then why did he back this flawed candidate, this flawed establishment candidate? If he was such a change agent, why didn't he go with Bernie Sanders, or why didn't he go with some other Democrat who was new and different and was going to take this country to this higher place he's talking about? Instead, he went with what seemed like the safest, most establishment, but flawed email and FBI investigation candidate.
10 or 20 years too early that the country wasn't ready for him. Pete and I were talking about this in the commercial break. He can still run again. Right? 10 years after he left office.
You just 2 consecutive terms. You could take one off and come back.
He could take on Donald Trump in 2020.
Isn't that something that would be challenged, though?
Why? I don't know. Maybe it would be. I don't know.
But nobody's tested it.
It's all so
Why not?
very condescending. You know, it's like, we're so smart. Us globalist elites, you know, with our international citizenship and their dreams of borderless worlds, we want to fundamentally transform America. And you just don't get it yet. You're just not there. You're in your tribe. You're wearing your red hat. You're deplorable. You know, you're not ready for it. The explanation is we were too cool. Like, Obama was too awesome.
You know what? There are a lot of people in this country.
Well, we were clean to our guns, too.
Well, a lot of people just don't want the country to change. They want to get back to actually what made this country originally the very best in the world.
And you can fix the problems, you know, racial divides and other things. That doesn't mean you want to go backwards in time. It means let's remember what makes America special, which is freedom. And then we can love each other in the process.
And learn from those mistakes.
Exactly.
All the mistakes that we learned from all those years. Yeah. It's an interesting conversation, interesting sound bites.
Just started.
We just gave you Ben Rhodes' book. You don't have to buy it.
Some other headlines we are following closely this morning, starting with a Fox News alert, a potential serial killer case in Arizona. Police think a fourth deadly shooting could be related to 3 others in the Phoenix area. The latest victim, a psychologist and counselor, shot dead at an office building. Police already connected the slayings of 2 paralegals to the killing of yet another victim. Permanent forensic psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Pitt worked on the murder investigation of Colorado child queen bee Joe Monet Ramsey. Remember that case? Police releasing this sketch of a possible suspect. Also, overnight, China warning it will back out of any new trade agreement if the U.S. raises tariffs. President Trump has threatened to increase tariffs of up to $150 billion of Chinese imports. China's stance comes as President Trump's team spent the weekend over in China for high-level trade talks. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross was the one leading those negotiations. And Syria's president reportedly wants to meet Kim Jong-un. North Korea state media is reporting that Bashar al-Assad recently expressed his interest in traveling to the rogue nation. There has been no indication a meeting has been arranged. The report comes as the international community awaits the highly anticipated June 12th meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un in Singapore.
Wow.
You got Russia jumping on board. Now
Yeah.
Syria, everyone's sort of wanting a
Well,
place
we
in
can
this.
talk to somebody that knows about Russia.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Maybe the
we will.
ambassador. He's coming up. Also, former House Speaker John Boehner says the Republican Party he knew is gone, and it's been replaced.
A Democratic congressional candidate comparing the president to Osama bin Laden in his new campaign ad. We debate him just ahead.
After 9/11, the greatest threat to our democracy.
The Republican Party is kind of taking a nap somewhere.
That was former House Speaker John Boehner declaring the Republican Party as he once knew it is gone, replaced by what he calls the Trump Party.
Taking a nap. Here to react to all this, former White House Chief of Staff and former RNC Chairman Reince Priebus. Always good to have you on, Reince.
Yeah, by the way, hey, it's nice to actually get you in front of the camera. You
You're tough
texted
looking.
me yesterday because you were about to come on and you bailed on us, and I wanted to give you a little grief about that, but I understand you had a good excuse.
Well, when you get a text from the baseball coach at about 6 o'clock in the morning saying they're moving the game forward, by 2 hours because they wanted to beat the rain, you have to understand, it's been raining in Washington, D.C. for a month and a half.
Yeah, the swamp.
I apologize, but I really, texting Ed Henry at 6:45 in the morning is always.
That sounds like
sure you
collusion.
enjoyed that,
Sounds
right?
like collusion, right?
Yeah,
In the making.
you got your priorities
He's
the
a
right
dad
order, though.
first, so
Yeah,
that's what
dad.
Speaking of collusion, we have a Russian we can root for now in the Washington Capitals. It's like the only Russian that we can be happy about in
NHL
America.
Stanley Cup, that's right.
That's right.
All right, Reince, what do you make of that quote there from John Boehner saying that the Republicans are basically taking a nap? I think he's actually speaking to a lot of the Trump supporters that felt when the president got into office, they didn't have his back. It wasn't like it was the Republican Party surrounding the president. It was the president oftentimes by himself.
Well, that may be true, but, without the Republican National Committee and without a president that was disciplined and on message and speaking to the American worker, I don't think we'd have what we have today. So you can never divorce that, and I'll always remind people that the actual party infrastructure was a huge part of that campaign. But as far as this issue is concerned, look, not since Ronald Reagan, and I'd say maybe even beyond Reagan, President Trump had a personality and a persona and a brand that's so unique, not just to American politics, but to the country, that he sort of owns this piece of real estate. And no matter how anyone wants to analyze it, look, the Republican Party is a big entity. But more than ever before, the Trump brand is a huge entity, and it intersects each other about 85% of all of the things that Trump and the party believe in. What I would challenge the Republican Party, though, is instead of debating whether or not Trump is the party or the party is Trump, to take the best of Trump, which I have always said from the very beginning, even when I was in the White House, just come on TV and say, if the Republican Party becomes the permanent party of the American worker, we will never lose a national election again. Since President Trump's been in office, we've added over 334,000 manufacturing jobs. That is President Trump's bread and butter. And of all the analysis out there this week about this great economy, I can tell you the one thing that the president has always been focused on is wage growth, because he knows that if people start putting more money in their pocket, it is absolute Teflon politically and for solidifying his future. And so I would just say that in a nutshell is where the party needs to be.
Is John Boehner saying, hey, basically Trump has succeeded in merging the two, or is he tipping his hand that, hey, the Never Trumper movement's still out there? It may be on the side. We haven't really embraced this president yet.
I think it's a little of both, right? I mean, because you guys can watch this among Republicans as well, which is, there's a reluctancy, at least a little bit. I mean, there's like, 10%, not much. There's a reluctancy to just admit the fact that under President Trump, we have had an incredible amount of prosperity. And I would challenge the president, start labeling it now. Don't call it the prosperity era, call it the Trump prosperity era, because that's really what will define President Trump. Now, he's got some big meetings coming up in Singapore, but, of all the distractions out there and of all the things that, you can watch on television that the media likes to obsess about, the one problem the anti-Trumpers have, and people with grievances and other, is that at the end of the day, President Trump, under his policies, have been doing an incredible job.
All right.
No one can deny it.
Reince Priebus, Chief of Staff, Party Chair, husband, and dad.
Most importantly.
Right. Thanks for coming in, sir.
Good to see you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see you. All right. Roseanne Barr, Samantha Bee, Joy Reid, all under fire for hateful rhetoric this week. They've all apologized. But should they be forgiven? Our Interfaith is here to weigh in just ahead. It's a panel you don't want to miss.
Plus, have you seen this? A Democratic congressional candidate comparing the president to Osama bin Laden in a new campaign ad. We debate him. Pete does. Head on next.
After 9/11, the greatest threat to our democracy lived in a cave. This message: I'm different. I'm not a politician. I'm a Rhodes Scholar who served in combat. I'm for a Medicare for all option and against drug companies that rip off seniors. I'll fight the gun lobby to protect children, not guns. After 9/11, the greatest threat to our democracy lived in a cave. Today, he lives in the White House. No one, even the president, is above the law. Barbara Comstock has beaten every politician. I'm different.
You heard that right. A new Democratic campaign ad for a congressional race in Virginia, comparing the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to Osama bin Laden. Joining me now, the man behind the ad, Virginia Democratic congressional candidate, Dan Helmer. Dan, thanks for being here. A couple things.
Thanks for having me, Peter. I'm so excited to be on the show.
Of course. A couple things up front. You served our country in Iraq and Afghanistan. We thank you for that.
Thank you too, Peter. I know you
probably walked around a lot of the same places. Yep, totally.
I'm sure we did. Thank you.
That goes as a given, no matter what. And also, we know you're running in a crowded primaries. You're trying to get noticed. I get that. It's politics.
Peter, I'm actually trying to talk about important messages.
No.
Right?
But obviously, an ad like this gets noticed. We're talking about it on the highest-rated cable morning show in America.
Well,
the question I have to you is, do you believe that Donald Trump is the moral equivalent of Osama bin Laden?
Well, I actually think, on 9/11, and my heart goes out to all of those we lost that day and their families. I was a cadet at West Point, and I knew I was going to be spending the next 2 years preparing to lead soldiers in combat. And I served combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I did it for a simple reason. I swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic. And right now,
okay, so I swore the same oath.
I know you did.
Swore the same oath. The reality is, are you saying he's an enemy? Are you saying he's a domestic enemy? Because obviously, Osama bin Laden is a foreign enemy. We agree with that. We understand that. Are you saying that President Trump is a domestic enemy? You're saying
I'm saying
enemies,
that
foreign and domestic.
I'm saying that the oath we took to defend the Constitution, I take seriously. This president doesn't. And one of the reasons I'm excited to be here on a show that I know that the president watches every morning is to make sure we deliver a message that change is coming, that no one, not even our president, is above the law.
But hold on,
and it's time to make sure that we have a Congress that holds him accountable. I'm tired of people who think we need to wait and see about a president who's violated our Constitution
so what is
and
he,
our
okay,
laws.
Because he fired Jim Comey and he says bad things about Bob Mueller. Let's be clear here.
Well,
no,
let's be clear. No, the president, has violated the emoluments clause of the Constitution. He has done actions that obstruct justice. He has tampered with witnesses. He has violated campaign finance laws. Any one of these, he's engaged in conduct unbecoming of a president.
A equals B. Donald Trump is a terrorist.
I said that the greatest threat to our democracy right now is a president who refuses to uphold his oath to abide by our Constitution and defend it. I mean, we can see who his friends are. After I launched this ad, RT, attacked me because they also helped him with the election.
Okay, so now we're going back to the
Russians
Russians because they helped him with the election. Get it? It was not Hillary Clinton's fault.
Well, no, I mean, this is what the Russians just did. The Russians just actually put out something in response to this ad saying they were defending President Trump because they wanted to see him
Russians can say whatever they want. We live in a world where they can say whatever they want, but you're still not going back to the original question. I'm standing on the island of Manhattan. Where you were at West Point, other people were in those towers. We're not debating we understand what happened.
We agree. Osama bin Laden's attack was abhorrent. I was willing to put my life on the line to defend us against that.
I got it. So did so many people. That's a good line.
I'm so proud
it's very
of all
true,
of them,
and
so
that's
many
all fine.
people
But
died
you're
for
now
that
running
because they
for
care
office.
about our Constitution.
You say you're not a politician. You are now running for office, and when you run for office, you get scrutinized. And when you put an ad out that says Osama bin Laden, Donald Trump are the same thing, you have to defend that. Tell me, is there a difference between Osama bin Laden and Donald Trump?
They are. They are very different threats to our democracy.
Are they both enemies?
The gravest threat to our democracy today is a president who doesn't take the oath to defend the Constitution seriously. And you want to talk about that? Let's talk about the ad. Let's talk about a progressive patriotism that stands for making sure every American has access to quality affordable health care.
But you're also accusing your other candidates in the race of saying they're in bed with the NRA because they have different views of how to defend a school than you do. The Second Amendment,
actually, no, let's
you can
be
have
clear.
different
Let's be
views
clear.
on that.
Barbara Comstock has taken over $130,000 from the NRA. And so you can walk into a gun show in my district and walk out without a background check with an assault rifle similar to what you and I carried in Iraq and Afghanistan.
You did another video on that. I saw that. My point is here, you
dig
your heels in on a ridiculous comparison. You seem like a nice guy. You seem like a reasonable guy. You're a Rhodes Scholar. I've been to some good schools, too. You're a smart guy. Got it. But you're digging your heels in on an argument that's untenable, and you're making yourself look bad. A progressive who says our president is the same as the guy who murdered 3,000 Americans, it's not a good idea.
Say that they are the same. I said that he is a threat to our democracy.
All right,
you are changing words. That's sort of the propaganda that comes out sometimes.
Dan?
We need to make sure we have leaders who are going to hold this president accountable.
Well, that's why we have elections.
And I want him to know that things are changing. We do have elections.
We do. Dan, thanks for your service and for your time.
Thank you so much for your service, too. I appreciate being on here.
Let's do it again sometime. You got it.
All right, look forward to it. Bye-bye.
All right, well, New York's top lawyer. Well, you can email us. What do you think about that segment? friends@foxnews.com. So he's so triggered by President Trump's pardon of Dinesh D'Souza, she's calling for him and Eric this week. They've all apologized, but should they be forgiven? Our interfaith panel.
This week, multiple TV personalities apologizing for crude comments. Roseanne Barr faced scrutiny as her hateful blog posts came to light. More of them came to light. So while some are willing to forgive for these actions, aren't others but should Rung Diamond Wiesenthal Center. Imam Talib Sharif is the president of the nation's mosque. And of course, Father Jonathan Morris, a Fox News religion contributor. Good morning to all of you. I'm so looking forward to this conversation because after a week of so much hate, I think we all need to find a way to be just better, kinder, more respectful people. Imam, I want to start with you because we've now heard apologies from the three folks that I've just mentioned. One of them was fired, Roseanne Barr. But in order to forgive, how important is it to feel like that apology is totally genuine? They actually feel sorry about what they did, what they said.
Abby, that's very important. In fact, it's interesting that that this is a topic this morning because we're in the middle of Ramadan right now, and every morning at 4:30 we've been reading the 30th and hearing a commentary. And today it ended with a saying that said, "Let them be forgiving, because wouldn't you want God to forgive you?" And you know that's a name of God in the Quran called Al-Ghafur, and it's mentioned 91 times, and which means that he's the ultimate forgiver, but it's his attribute, and it says that we should be saying the same thing, seeking forgiveness. Now, what does forgiveness do for us? It gives us an opportunity to turn back to our original purity in nature that in the excellence that God created our life upon. So it's very important, Abby.
Yeah, and Father John, how important is it to take politics out of this? Because it does seem like where we are today, if you agree with that person, if you agree with that hate-filled joke, that you think it's okay, that it is okay, it passes, it flies, it passes the test. And when you don't agree with it, you think that that person should be fired or their apology is not enough. How do we get out of this place?
It happens to all of us, first and foremost, those feelings of saying, hey, they're not on my side, therefore let's get rid of them. Plus they got one on our side. It's not a healthy society when every public figure is one tweet away from being dragged out into the public square, shamed and stoned. That's what we're doing right now. And, I think you asked the question about should they feel sorry? We can't control people's feelings, but The big thing is whether or not they've made a decision to change their behavior. And I think we shouldn't be waiting for somebody to mess up and then stone them, but rather give them a chance to change. And if they don't change, of course, they shouldn't be in the public square in that way.
Rabbi Cooper.
I agree with that.
Yeah, go ahead. Rabbi Cooper, I want to bring you in this as well. We're talking about forgiveness here and how we can learn to forgive. Is there a difference in forgiving spiritually and forgiving just culturally?
Well, good morning. First of all, the possibility of change, repentance, these are great contributions of Judaism to the world. I think the key term when we're talking about misdeeds between people is the issue of accountability. It's not enough that you feel badly that you did something. Our system demands that you try to actually correct the situation. And obviously in the world of Twitter and Facebook and 24/7 cable, it's a difficult thing to do. So if you're talking between yourself and the good Lord, that's a private matter. When you're in the public square, you don't get that forgiveness unless you have accountability and you're able to reach out to the people that you hurt. Obviously, at the end of the day, have you been able to show in the public square a change of attitude and behavior? And if you don't deserve forgiveness.
Yeah. Bishop Jackson, we look back on this week. It was an ugly week. A lot of nasty things were said. The racist card was pulled. A lot of other things that you could say are just as bad were said about folks. What do we learn from this week? What do you take away? How can we all better ourselves?
Well, I think we have a teachable moment. Personal repentance is great, but there also needs to be structural change. I believe that we're in a moment of civic awakening, the Me Too movement, people dealing with race, class issues. In America, we want justice, but the bar for how we bring change is important. I believe the networks hold some responsibilities. They knew Roseanne was edgy. They know Samantha Bee was edgy. And I believe we need to begin to use these teachable moments, and the networks need to begin to put on some programming that show us a moral path. I think that would be very helpful. Personal and then structural change is needed in our culture.
Yeah, and Mom, though, you listened to some of the things that were said, whether it was a tweet or Samantha Bee, who wrote and I obviously helped produce that monologue. They knew what they were saying, and obviously they felt okay about saying those things. What does that tell you about where we are as a society? Are we losing a sense of spirituality where we say, you know, you can call someone whatever you want, and that flies?
Absolutely, we are losing something. You know, just because you can do something. In fact, just last night I was with Cardinal Weir, and he was giving a speech last night. And one of the things he said is just because you can do something or say something doesn't mean that you should. You know, in the state of nature, our parents, they begin to give us the moral teachings that we need when we're young. Yeah. Now we have to look at this and say, would you teach your children to have this kind of behavior? No, we try to teach them to stay on the course that they come here upon, which is pure, honest, loving, obedient. You know, so what's happening now? Intentions, I say actions are judged by intentions. Now, what you think is revealed by what you do. What you do reveals what you really believe. And so that belief gets to the core of the abstract of a human being, which means that something in you is not progressing the way God created you to progress if you're doing things that are wrong. So yes, we have to address it because, again, forgiveness doesn't mean that we have to pretend that didn't happen. You know, it just means that now you cover that, and if you see sincerity, because repentance also means to turn around. And turn around to what? Again, go back to the natural path of human goodness.
All right, Father John, quickly, how do we get back decency?
You know, I think a lot of people are saying, well, those are public figures. Here's how we get back public decency. Go to your Twitter feed right now, go to your Facebook, and see the type of things that you have said about other people. And then think, if I knew them, if they were in front of me, would I say them? If not, get rid of them and start over. Everyone has a say right now, even if you're not a public figure, and it changes our society when we allow ourselves to say things that we wouldn't say necessarily if everybody knew about them.
Rabbi, Bishop, quickly, 30 minutes to each of you. Rabbi, your last words here.
Well, I think that parents, as well as their kids, should learn to shut off the social media at least once a week for a day, as we Orthodox Jews do, and get real friends, shut the thing off. Charity and clarity begins at home. I would look more to the home rather than to the government to address this problem.
All right, Bishop, quickly, last word here.
We need a change. We need to be the change we want to see we and our children need to do, love, and feel for others. Compassion is the way, and God's love is the answer.
All right. Bishop, Rabbi, Father John, Imam, it was really great to have all of you here this morning. A wonderful discussion. I think we all need this today after such a hateful week. Have a wonderful Sunday.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, President Trump pardoning conservative filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza, now New York's top lawyer, wants to get rid of double jeopardy so he and others pardoned could face more prosecution. Dinesh
words now apologizing to a Texas detective. An employee refused to serve the officer when he was wearing plain clothes because he was carrying a gun. Company policy states customers, except for the police, can't openly carry firearms. Whataburger says they are proud to serve all law enforcement, claiming this was just a misunderstanding. Probably was. Second story here, McDonald's could be headed to North Korea. Kim Jong-un reportedly wants to open a, quote, Western hamburger franchise in the Hermit Kingdom. This could be considered a sign of goodwill toward the U.S. as President Trump reinstates the high-stakes summit with the North Korean dictator. Ed just wants a cheeseburger.
The filmmaker, Dinesh D'Souza. But the decision is not sitting well with some people. New York's top lawyer wants him and others pardoned by the president to be able to face additional prosecution in her state of New York. Underwood saying, quote, lawmakers must act now to close New York's double jeopardy loophole and ensure that anyone who evades federal justice by virtue of a politically expedient pardon can be held accountable if they violate New York law. But wouldn't this violate the Constitution? Let's ask newly pardoned conservative filmmaker, author of The Big Lie, Dinesh D'Souza. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me first get you to react more.
I might.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, far from shuddering at this latest development, I'm actually chuckling about it because I think it's very eye-opening. I have maintained from the beginning that this prosecution, in my case, was political, that it was motivated by the Obama administration's desire to somehow get me. And the other side, the progressives, Preet Bharara, my prosecutor, said, no, that's not the case. This is just civil servants acting, carrying out the law in the normal course of things. Mm-hmm. And so here comes the Attorney General. This is the highest judicial official in the state of New York. Yeah. And she's basically saying, listen, the normal course of things didn't work. This guy got away. And now we got to get him some other way. So let's come up with a strategy for prosecuting people twice.
Right.
My favorite term is the double jeopardy loophole. So this basic constitutional protection, Ed, has now become a loophole. And I guess if I had gotten off because of an illegal search and seizure, they'd want to close the illegal search and seizure loophole or the Fifth Amendment loophole. So you see that these people will stop at nothing. It confirms that this is a political hit, and if they don't get their way, they want to be able to take a second strike.
But Dinesh, what do you say more broadly to the criticism this week that, look, the president pardons you, even though you faced these charges, you were convicted in a court. He said you were treated unfairly because you believe it was political, but you were convicted. And now he's talking about Rod Blagojevich and Martha Stewart, and that it's not going through the normal process. It's not going through the Justice Department and being carefully weighed.
Well, the first point to remember, Ed, is that even though there's a lot of talk to the effect that he voluntarily admitted he was convicted, it's important to realize that these things are a bludgeoning process. In other words, the way that they get a voluntary plea is they threaten to put on all these additional, often redundant charges. They describe the same thing 4 different ways. Each of those crimes carries years and years in prison. So they basically say to you, we will destroy your life unless you plead. And so both the innocent and the guilty are forced to plead because of the strong-arm tactics that they use. Now, the very fact that Trump is looking at people as diverse as Martha Stewart and Rod Blagojevich, a Democrat, shows that this is not just Trump rewarding his ideological friends. He's looking at high-profile cases to kind of send a message that this needs some fixing.
But a lot of people feel like they're bludgeoned in the judicial process. In your case, you had a very powerful Republican in Senator Ted Cruz who was able to bring this to the commander-in-chief. Wasn't that favorable treatment?
Yes, it was, but it was also the case that I had a very powerful Democrat, Barack Obama, who was very upset about a movie that I made, was denouncing me on his personal website, BarackObama.com, unleashed his dogs like Eric Holder and Preet Bharara to go after me. It took powerful people to get me, and it took powerful people to get me off.
All right, Dinesh D'Souza, we'll leave it right there. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Google labeling a GOP state senator a bigot. With this,
There's such a thing as being too patriotic. Take a look at this display. Layer Reality in Massachusetts displaying 200 American flags to honor our veterans, but the town slapped that business with a violation for, quote, excessive flags.
So how does Lair Realty respond to that? By putting out hundreds of more American flags. Joining us now, the employee who helped place the flags, John Crandall, and the CEO, Stacey Alcorn. Thank you both for joining us this morning. John, let me start with you. So I believe the concept is the flags start going up around Memorial Day. They stay till the 4th of July. Why have you in years previous and this year done this patriotic display?
Well, we always support our veterans, and Memorial Day is a big time for our country to support all the fallen and all the deceased, all that died in the line of duty. And in addition to all the parades that go on that day, it's a big time.
Sure.
So, Stacey, you get this violation notice from the town manager who says, this is excessive. This is too many flags. You gotta reel it back in. Tell us what happened.
So Friday morning, John texted me a photo of the notice at about 7:30 in the morning. And it took about 5 minutes for it to sink in. I'm like, wait a minute, these are flags, American flags. So I texted John back. I said, I think this is one of those things that we dig our heels in. And I said, I'm going to go buy some more flags.
Absolutely. So you said we're going to dig in. They said there were excessive amount of flags. Here's the statement from the assistant town manager. Apparently the town manager also has an assistant. This is the quote. This is commercial establishment located at a busy intersection. It was on the front lawn of that particular property. And in our opinion of our code enforcement officer, the building commissioner, it was in violation. They say it was excessive, the amount of flags. John, it's private property from what we know, and these are American flags. Did they give you a sense of what's not excessive? What's too many?
No, they didn't, and that's the weird part. We only had 200 out. The previous year we had 420 out, which was a full box. This year we had 200 out. We split them up, and I put some in another town. So to be excessive, it was beautiful, but it was certainly not excessive. And I don't think you could have 2,000 out there and it would look as excessive.
Well, a lot of people would agree with you on that. Stacey, you guys are saying this is not it's not a commercial. This is about our American flag. This is about honoring the men and women who have served this country. It's about so much more than that.
Exactly. There are local businesses, for example, tax companies that have people in costume out in the street waving banners trying to get people in. This had nothing to do with our business. It was us as a community just honoring our veterans and those who served for us.
So what does the lawn look like right now? How is it left?
Oh boy, it's grown significantly in the last 48 hours. Community members keep adding to it.
People stop by, they tell us stories about their loved ones and deceased. It's amazing.
Do you think the town will change their mind? It sounds like they just, went too far. They might not have realized it.
I would hope so. I mean, we have not heard from anybody from the town since receiving the notice. But what we know is whether they fine us or don't fine us, those flags are staying up at least through Flag Day and 4th of July.
Well,
Amen.
You might hear from them now. Great to have you on this morning, John.
Thanks for standing up.
Thank you so much.
It's sad that we have to stand up for something like this, but I'm so glad people do. Well done.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
All right. Well, coming up, a question we are asking this morning. Are parents too often rewarding their children's failures instead of letting them fail and learn from it? We discuss the growing trend with our parenting panel next hour.
More to that. Plus, my dad is back from